The night my father said that kid means nothing to us. Something inside me snapped so quietly I almost missed the sound. I was still holding the melted birthday candle, still hearing Ava ask if her grandparents were almost here. My phone buzzed with their excuses, then their demands, then their silence. I stared at the screen, feeling the room tilt, feeling every Monday morning I'd ever paid for their love collapse at once. But what they didn't know was that this time I wasn't going to bend. Before I go any further, tell me where you're watching from, and hit like and subscribe if you've ever been blindsided by the people who were supposed to love you. I used to think I was the only one carrying this kind of wound. But if any part of this already feels familiar, stay with me. I grew up in a house where love was measured, weighed, and always found lacking, at least when it came to me. One of my clearest memories is from when I was 10, standing in the middle of the school courtyard with a wrinkled math test in my hands. Kids were chasing each other around the swings, backpacks slamming against their shoulders, the air smelling like chalk and microwaved pizza. And there was my father, Charles Carter, staring down at me like I'd personally embarrassed him in front of the entire town. "You're always a disappointment," he said. Not quietly, not privately. I remember the shock more than the shame, how it felt like the world briefly tilted, then snapped back into place like nothing had happened. He walked away. I stayed frozen. I didn't know it then, but this wasn't a one-time wound. It was a blueprint. By 15, I'd learned where I stood in our family, behind Ethan always. Even in the summer heat, when cicadas screamed from every tree and our small kitchen felt like a sauna, Mom slid a diner job application across the table without looking at me. "Your brother needs to go to that science camp," Linda said. "Boys need opportunity." So I worked 8-hour shifts, wiping ketchup from booths, walking home with the smell of fryer oil soaked into my hair. My paycheck bought Ethan's camp and a new pair of sneakers for Dad. I got blisters and a vague pat on the shoulder. At 18, when I received my acceptance letter into a nursing program, my chest lit up with something close to hope. I held the envelope under the porch light, imagining a life I'd built myself. A week later, Dad dropped a stack of loan papers in front of me. "You'll help us out," he said. Just like that, my scholarship became another line item in his problems. Mom didn't say a word. She stirred her tea like she was afraid to hear what silence might reveal. Motherhood should have changed something. I thought it would. When Ava was born, small and soft and perfect, I believed maybe my parents would finally soften too. One afternoon, I drove to their house, exhaustion pressing behind my eyes. I'd gotten a last-minute interview at the hospital and needed someone to watch Ava for 2 hours. Linda opened the door, arms crossed, before I even spoke. "I'm not a babysitter," she said. Then she shut the door. I sat in my car and cried, Ava sleeping in the backseat, unaware that I was learning a harsh truth: some people protect their image, not their family. The years that followed blurred together, ER shifts under buzzing hospital lights, coming home to a small apartment lit by Ava's drawings taped on the wall. Her art was full of bright colors, pink stick figures, yellow suns, blue houses, hope in crayon form. Every Monday at 9 a.m., I transferred money to my parents. $700 sent like tribute. I didn't think about it anymore. I just did it. It was easier than facing the alternative, admitting the love I was paying for didn't exist. But underneath all that routine, beneath the long nights and quiet mornings, an old ache kept resurfacing. And I didn't know it then, but all those memories were circling back, preparing to collide in a way I couldn't stop. By the time Ava turned 3, she had already learned how to dance before she learned how to doubt. She'd twirl across our tiny living room in a sparkly skirt, her curls bouncing, her feet tapping against the laminate floor. And every few days she'd pause mid-spin to ask, "Do Nana and Grandpa love me?" The question hit the same spot every time, right beneath the ribs where the truth lived. "They should," I always thought. But what I said was, "Of course they do, sweetheart." It was a lie, dressed as comfort. There was one Thanksgiving that still sticks with me, sharper than most. Ava was 4. I baked a pumpkin pie from scratch, burned one edge, but it smelled like cinnamon and effort. We drove to my parents' house, my stomach tight the whole way. I told myself this holiday might be different. It wasn't. Mom barely noticed us. She fussed over Ethan, filled his plate twice, asked him about work life, dating, everything she never asked me. Dad didn't look away from the football game long enough to see Ava trying to show him her drawing. Ethan sat frozen in place, offering me small apologetic glances as if he could will the room to be kinder. I left with the untouched pie in my lap, Ava sleeping in the back seat, and a familiar thought sinking heavy in my chest: it didn't matter how much I gave, I would always be invisible to them. The ER became the one place where my effort meant something. Patients cried, thanked me, clutched my hand. Coworkers nodded with real respect. It was strange being valued everywhere except in the one place I needed it most. Every Monday morning after my shift, I came home to our quiet apartment, kicked off my clogs, and sat at the kitchen table. Ava's drawings on the wall were always the first thing I looked at, bright colors on cheap paper. Proof that love, real love, could grow anywhere. Then I'd open my banking app. $700. Send. Done. No call from them afterward. No gratitude. No, we're okay now because of you. Just silence. A silence I kept mistaking for peace. Sometimes, during the slowest hours at work, I imagined my parents showing up at my door, unannounced, holding a toy for Ava or a meal for me. I imagined Dad saying, "We're proud of you," or Mom hugging me without needing something first. Those daydreams never lasted long. Reality had sharp edges, and it cut through fantasies easily. What I didn't realize was that while I was desperately trying to hold this fractured relationship together, my parents were quietly crafting their own narrative, one where they were the heroes, the martyrs, the misunderstood saints of the community. And while I was sending them money hoping for scraps of affection, they were preparing a story that would paint me as unstable, dramatic, ungrateful. A story they would use soon, loudly, publicly, and without warning. At that point, all the signs were already there. I just didn't want to see them. But the truth has a way of rising slow at first, then all at once. And once it started, there was no stopping what came next. It didn't fall apart suddenly. It unraveled in small ways, at first quiet, almost invisible, but each thread pulled something loose inside me. It started as it always did on a Monday. I had just finished a brutal night shift. My hands still smelled faintly of latex and antiseptic, the ER's fluorescent lights buzzing in my head like leftover static. When I stepped into our apartment, Ava was asleep on my shoulder, warm and soft, her breath brushing against my collarbone. I tucked her into bed, made a cup of coffee, and sat at the kitchen table. 9:00 a.m. $700. Send. I didn't think anymore. I just obeyed the ritual. 2 minutes later, my phone vibrated. A message from my mother. Add groceries this week. No greeting. No gratitude. Just expectation wrapped in command. I put the phone face down. As the weeks passed, Ava's questions became a kind of background ache. Do you think they'll come this time, Mommy? Her eyes were always full of hope, her voice soft, delicate. I smiled like it didn't cut me open. Maybe. But we both knew. Maybe really meant no. She made birthday invitations for them. Glitter glue, crooked hearts, pink markers smudged on her fingers. I mailed them anyway, even though I knew better. Hope can be cruel like that. On the day of her birthday, the backyard smelled like lemonade and sunlight. Balloons floated lazily in the autumn breeze. Kids shrieked in the rented bouncy castle, and parents gathered at the snack table sipping lukewarm coffee. Ava stood at the edge of the yard, cupcake in her hand, eyes glued to the driveway. Maybe they're just late, she whispered. I tied another balloon to the fence, pretending my chest wasn't burning. Maybe, I said. An hour passed, then two. By the time the sun dipped low, Ava's smile had collapsed into something fragile. When the last guest left, she sat on the porch steps, her sparkly shoes dangling. Maybe they forgot, she said softly. I wanted to scream, but I knelt, tucked her hair behind her ear, and whispered, We still had fun, right? She nodded, but it felt like a lie on both our tongues. That night after I put her to bed, I saw a new text from Mom. Tell Ava happy birthday from us. That was it. 8 words that felt like a slap. I called them. I don't know why, maybe I needed to hear something that resembled remorse. Dad answered, already irritated. What is it, Emily? You didn't come today, I said. She waited for you. A pause. Then the sentence that carved itself into me like a blade. That kid means nothing to us. I didn't speak. I didn't cry. He hung up. I placed my phone on the counter. My hands began to shake, but something else, something quiet and steady, rose beneath the trembling. I opened my banking app. Recurring payments. Cancel. Confirm. Cancel. Confirm. Every tap felt like reclaiming a piece of myself they'd taken. The final line, $700. Weekly Monday transfer. I deleted it. 40 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. Mom, can you order us dinner? We don't have food. No mention of Ava. No mention of what Dad had said. Just another demand. This time, I didn't respond. The next morning, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. Miss Carter. This is Richard, your parents' landlord. Their rent didn't come through. Is everything all right? I could hear the hesitation, the confusion. It's not my responsibility anymore, I said. And for the first time in years, the words felt true. That afternoon, Ethan called. Mom says you've lost your mind, he said. Have I asked. She said you cut them off. I did. A pause. Then quietly, good. I'm done too. The world stalled. You've been helping them for years, he said. Groceries, gas, bills. I sat down slowly. They told me you never helped, I whispered. He laughed, sharp, humorless. They told me the same about you. It hit us both at once. They hadn't needed our money. They needed our separation. And their story was just getting darker. 2 days later, the next hit came. I was folding Ava's laundry, tiny socks, pink leggings, still warm from the dryer, when my phone buzzed. Ethan again. Don't freak out, he said. My stomach dropped. What now? Mom just went live on Facebook. For a moment, everything around me muted. Ava was humming softly in the living room, coloring a unicorn. The innocence of that sound made the dread worse. I grabbed my laptop. The live stream replay was already everywhere, shared, reposted, commented on by people who didn't know me at all. The thumbnail showed Linda clutching a tissue like she was auditioning for a church play, eyes red but suspiciously dry. Charles sat beside her, stiff-backed jaw set in the practiced posture of a man who loves sympathy but hates accountability. Mom sniffed, looking straight into the camera. "We've always loved Emily," she said. "Always." Dad nodded, right on cue. "But she's been telling people terrible lies about us, saying we don't want to see her child. None of that is true." I felt heat rise up my neck. Then Dad leaned closer, voice low, and rehearsed. "She's been forcing money on us. We told her to stop. She wouldn't. She needs help." My breath caught. For years I had quietly kept their world spinning, and in return they were publicly rewriting the whole story, painting me as unstable, ungrateful, unhinged. Then came the moment that knocked the air out of me. Dad held up a printed photo of Ava in her pink birthday dress. "This child does not exist to us." I froze. The laundry slid from my hands. The room felt suddenly too bright, too loud. The comments were instant. "Poor parents. She sounds manipulative. Some kids are just broken. People love a villain even if they invent her." I closed the laptop. My hands were shaking, but beneath the fear something colder was forming. The next morning, Richard, the landlord, left another voicemail. "Your parents said you'd handle their rent today." I called him back. "I'm not paying their bills anymore." A beaded silence. "I understand," he said quietly. The shift was happening, small but unmistakable. Later that afternoon, Ethan texted, "We need to talk." We met at a worn-down diner off the interstate, neon lights flickering overhead. Ethan looked exhausted, like someone who'd been carrying secrets too heavy for too long. He slid an envelope across the table. "I found this when I was helping Mom last year. I paid it. I didn't want you dealing with it." Inside, a medical bill. Linda Carter. Psychiatric evaluation. Charged to my insurance. My throat tightened. "I never approved this." "I know. Why didn't you tell me?" He sighed. "Because she said it was a one-time thing." I believed her. I pressed my palms against my forehead. "What else?" He hesitated. "There's a loan." I lifted my head. "A loan in your name, 7 years ago. They used it to save the house." The room blurred, plates clattering, coffee machine hissing, forks scraping against worn plates. My pulse thudded in my temples. "They forged my name. Mom said you agreed." Dad backed her up. I let out a shaky breath. "Of course they did." Ethan leaned in, his voice dropping. "They're meeting with the church board this week. They want to get ahead of everything. Make sure everyone hears their version before yours." It was like watching a slow-motion car crash, one you can't stop, only brace for. That evening, my cousin Nora called. "Emily, I found something." Her voice shook. "It's a recording of Uncle Charles, from years ago." My skin prickled. "What does it say?" She hesitated. "He said, he never wanted you. That you were a mistake." The words didn't shatter me this time. They sharpened me. Because suddenly everything aligned: the favoritism, the coldness, the lies, the manipulation, the need to control the story. The erasure of Ava. It all made sense. And what my parents didn't realize was the truth they'd tried so hard to bury was about to drag them under. The night Nora sent me the recording, I waited until Ava fell asleep. The apartment was dark except for the soft glow of my phone screen. My thumb hovered over the play button. And then I heard it. My father's voice, steady, unbothered, almost amused. "I never wanted Emily. She was a mistake." A burst of laughter in the background. A clink of glasses. Like it was casual. Like it was harmless. Like I had never been a person to him at all. I paused the recording. The silence afterward felt heavier than the words. The next morning, Aunt Valerie texted me, "Come to my place. Now." When I stepped into her backyard, everything smelled like grilled corn and summer heat. Kids ran between picnic tables. Relatives chatted in small clusters. And right in the center, exactly where they loved to be, stood my parents. Linda had a plastic cup in hand, already mid-tragedy, tears shimmering without falling. "We don't know what happened to Emily," she was telling a small group. "She's confused, troubled. We've always been there for her." Charles nodded solemnly, the perfect supporting actor. "We tried to love her. You know that." My jaw clenched. Then Nora stepped forward from the crowd, phone in hand screen, glowing like a weapon. Her expression was steady, unshaken. Aunt Valerie's voice cut through the noise. "Everyone, listen." The entire yard quieted. A few kids stopped running. Even the grill sputtered softer. Mom blinked. "Valerie, what are you doing?" Valerie didn't answer. "Nora," she said, "play it." Mom's face drained. Dad's posture tightened. And then the recording filled the yard. "I never wanted Emily. She was a mistake." Gasps. A cup dropped. Someone whispered, "Oh God." Mom stumbled forward. That audio is old. You don't understand," Dad snapped. "You're taking it out of context." Aunt Valerie shot back. "What context makes that okay?" Silence. A heavy, unforgiving silence. Relatives who had known my parents for decades stared at them like seeing strangers. Every carefully crafted lie, every performance, every pity story, they all cracked in a moment. Mom reached for someone's arm. "Please, we love our daughter." No one reached back. Uncle James stepped forward, voice firm. "If you can say that about your own child, you don't belong here." His words didn't rise. They landed. Dad opened his mouth, then closed it. There was nothing left to spin. Linda grabbed her purse. Charles followed. They walked through the backyard, past the picnic tables, past the relatives who silently parted straight out the gate. No applause, no confrontation, just rejection. I watched them leave, their silhouettes shrinking against the bright afternoon sun, and instead of breaking, something inside me aligned quiet and sharp. For the first time in my life, the truth wasn't a burden I carried alone. It was a mirror my parents finally had to face. They had spent years rewriting my story, but that day the story corrected itself, and I felt free. After the backyard exploded with truth, everything around me felt unnervingly calm. It was like the world finally stopped buzzing. I drove home with the windows cracked open, the late autumn air brushing against my face. Ava hummed in the back seat, kicking her heels lightly, unaware of the earthquake that had just split our family open. At home, I set her up with crayons while I made tea. Then my phone lit up. "Pastor Anderson, your parents came by the church. They're upset. They said you twisted their words. I'd like to hear your side." For the first time in my life, someone actually wanted my truth. I typed, "I can come tomorrow," but I already knew I wouldn't need to defend myself. The recording was everywhere, the live stream was everywhere, and people were finally connecting the dots my parents had spent decades scattering. That evening, I checked Facebook. A stitched video, Mom's live stream plus the backyard confrontation, had thousands of views, hundreds of comments. My parents' photos had quietly disappeared from the church website. Their circle of supporters had gone silent. It was all collapsing piece by piece without me moving a single muscle. Ava ran to me with a drawing, eyes shining. "Look, Mommy, it's us, and Uncle Ethan, and Aunt Valerie." She pointed to two small stick figures in the corner. I was going to draw Nana and Grandpa, but I didn't know what color they are. My heart squeezed, not in pain this time, but in clarity. "You don't have to draw people who don't show up," I said softly. Later, after she fell asleep, I opened the drawer where I kept old paperwork, forgotten receipts, tax documents, reminders of years I survived. Sitting on top now was the loan agreement, my name, their signatures, proof of the betrayal behind the performances. My parents expected me to cave, to save them, to fall back into the old role I'd played for so long. But the truth was simple. I didn't owe them anything anymore. My revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even planned. It was silence. A silence sharper than any confrontation. A silence that let their lies collapse under their own weight. And they never saw it coming. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, hit subscribe. Stories like this don't end with one confrontation, and neither does healing. Maybe you've carried wounds no one ever saw or kept quiet to keep the peace the way I did for years. You're not alone here. This space is for the ones who learn to stand up without shouting, to walk away, without looking back, to choose peace over permission. Stay with me. There's more to tell, more to rebuild, and maybe a truth you've been afraid to face that could finally set you free.